am a comic book fan, as I'm sure many people at this convention are. So for a long time, I taught a comic book workshop, and that was pretty great. I coached a lot of comic books from idea to finished, and that was awesome. After that, I made the crazy choice. I went to school, I got my degree, got it in filmmaking, and now I run a channel on YouTube called Comic Crash, where I talk about comic books and stuff, and it's a great time. And I love it, and I love superheroes. And specifically, I made a very bold choice that changed the course of my life in around 2012. I finished Batman. I read Batman, the Scott Snyder run, all the way through to, at the point, the current time, right? And I needed something new to read. Now, the logical choice would be, let's read Detective Comics. That's kind of the same thing, right? Like, that's just more Batman. But I made the silly choice to read some Superman comics. And it changed my life, and I became crazy obsessed with all things Superman. Just blew me away with just how cool this character was. And something that anyone who hops into Superman comics is going to find out very quickly, and might surprise you, is that Supergirl doesn't show up very much. She's not like a regular character in the Superman books, and I was really surprised by that. She shows up in books that are specifically about like her relationship with Superman, and then really, really, really big events. And few stories in Superman canon get bigger than the death and return of Superman. Now, this wasn't my first read. I wouldn't recommend it as anyone's first read, because I don't think you'd get the gravitas unless you read a couple of other books first. But I got to this point, and you know how the story goes. Doomsday is stomping across America, just causing all kinds of damage and havoc in this pathway. And you have everyone jumping in to try and stop it. Superman is busy off doing something. And you have the Justice League show up, and they just get poppled. And then it gets into Metropolis, and Lex sends his soldiers out to try and stop it, and they just can't. They get pummeled as well. And then Supergirl shows up. The second to last line of defense, second only to Superman, right? And at this point, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Supergirl has shown up. You know, she's Superman's cousin from the planet Krypton. She's kind of the same thing. And then Doomsday punches her in the face, and her face completely melts, and then she turns into purple goop. I could not wrap my mind around this. Like, to keep it in perspective, this book is weird, okay? So it starts off with Superman dealing with, like, mole people monsters underneath Metropolis. It's like, okay, cool, superheroes, that's fun. And then there's, like, a whole village that was made out of a tree that nobody knew about, but it's very hard to miss, and it's just outside of Metropolis. And then you meet Lex Luthor, who's both his son and not his son, like his own son, and he genetically modified himself to have an Australian accent. I wish I was making that up. No, that is what happened in the book. And beyond all that weirdness, this happens. And I just had to know why. Now, from here, I went on this incredible journey where I was just trying to explore who this character was and what she was all about. Why haven't I been seeing her in the Superman books? And most importantly, why is she purple goop? First, I need to introduce you to a guy named Otto Binder. Otto Binder is very, very cool. When we talk about the history of comics, unfortunately, we kind of go, oh, they were a big thing in the 40s, and then government censorship in the 50s, but then Stan Lee happened, and everything's okay. But between all of that, you had some legends who were doing everything they could to keep comic books afloat. And one of those is Otto Binder. We have a conservative estimate that he wrote 5,000 comic books in his career. That is a crazy amount of writing. And probably, I would argue this is his second biggest achievement. He was hanging out at Fawcett, which at the time was a different publishing studio altogether, and their big claim to fame was they had Captain Marvel, now Shazam. And he wrote a bunch of Shazam, and along with that, he created Mary Marvel, amongst the bajillion books he was writing. And Mary Marvel really took off. People really loved this character. And then he's like, I'm kind of overworking at Fawcett, I guess. I'm going to just chill out. And then DC comes in and poaches him and says, hey, we want you to write some Superman stuff. Because you were writing Captain Marvel, you were doing pretty good stuff. Or like, pretty good stuff with Captain Marvel. Is that okay? Cool. After a while, he said, I want to introduce a Supergirl. I want to introduce a character that is female and has Superman's abilities, and I think it would work out really well. And as you can see, I have Mary Marvel and work for them. And DC, they looked at his track record. They looked at how well Mary Marvel was doing, and they said, no. They don't want to take the risk. Now, I work in marketing right now as like the job that pays me. And I've learned that when you want to do something really cool and creative, and the people who control the money to let you do the creative thing say no, what you do is you propose a test. Is our first prototype Supergirl is Lois Lane. Now, Lois Lane getting superpowers is nothing new, and it's something that pops up every once in a while, even to today. Most recently, the newest Superman run has had her getting some superpowers, but prior to that, the first one was actually Action Comics number 60. We're talking about early 1940s here, was the first time they experimented giving someone else, particularly a woman, Superman's powers. So it's not like they were unique to this idea, but they all had kind of an interesting and similar problem to each other. And to demonstrate that, I wanted to take a look at Superman number 159. Now this is a bit of an anachronism because this was actually released after Supergirl was introduced, but I think it's very representative of what these Lois Lane superhero stories were like. Basically, this is a what-if story where instead of Superman getting sent to Earth, Lois got sent to Krypton as Earth was exploding. And she got superpowers because that's what needs to happen for the story to work. And basically, she shows up and just does Superman's job way better and way more efficiently than he does. Like, Brainiac shows up and he's all like, oh, I'm going to shrink Kandor and stuff, and Lois shows up and says, nah, bruh, and just like stops him. He can't even get a shrink rate out fast enough. It's just, she just stops him. She even redoes like this story's version of Lex Luthor, which Superman was never able to do. Like, I actually really love this book. Of all of the Silver Age Superman stories, I don't typically love Silver Age Superman, but this one is probably my favorite Silver Age book from Superman. And then they ruin it on the last page within 5 panels. The last page has 6 panels on it. The first one, she redeems the book's version of Lex Luthor, but then she gets out into the jungle days later as Superman. That's the name she chose for herself because it's okay. Flies Kal-El to Krypton's Scarlet Jungle in quest of rare medical herbs. What's that meteor over there? It can't be Earthite, Kryptonite. It shines purple instead of orange, red instead of green. Is it possible there could be a purple form of Earthite? Yes, readers, purple Earthite acts like red Kryptonite, only all its effects are permanent. I can't lift you or fly, and my X-ray vision won't go away. Great Krypton, somehow you've lost your superpowers. It's true, I can fly and I have X-ray vision. I'm a real Superman now. I'll carry you back to Cryptopolis. Kal-El will come back. You can't, just because I'm now an ordinary girl and don't have to wear a costume and you're a Superman, you can't give me the cold shoulder. It isn't fair. Now, Candy, that's what they've been calling her in the book. You must get over your petty feminine jealousy of me. Bye. The end. It's like, what? And this is kind of the case with all of these stories, is that Lois Lane would somehow lose all of those superpowers regardless of whether or not it made sense for the rest of the story. And then Superman says something that makes him kind of come off as a jerk and the story is over. I can see where the publishers of DC are coming from a little bit, because they've tried giving Lois Lane superpowers, and it never stuck, but I sometimes wonder if it was their fault. Which brings us to the second prototype of Supergirl, which was Clark Kent. If there was any book that was more influential than Superman in Action Comics in the Golden Age, I would argue that it was Superboy. Superboy was exactly what it sounds like. It was the adventures of Superman as a kid. If you could imagine if you were to combine Super Friends with Smallville, you would kind of have what Superboy was trying to be. Now, issue 78 was written by Otto Binder, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because this was one of the first times that he created an experiment to show that, yes, it still works, and you could actually say something really cool and important with it. And that is where we get to Clark Kent alias Super Sister. So basically what happens in this story is Superboy is flying around as he does, and he sees a spaceship, and the spaceship, the pilot sees Superboy flying out of her window, and she gets shocked and actually starts to lose control of the spacecraft, and Superboy has to pick it up and land it gently on the ground. And it makes a very unfortunate statement about women and driving. The 1950s were something, weren't they? And she blasts him with this magic ring, and as he's flying away with this magic ring, he looks into his reflection, the magic ring turned him into a girl. It's like, if you're going to be sexist, you're going to have to be sexist as a girl. Take that. And he has, thankfully for him, he has the kind of parents that every trans kid wishes they had, and they're just super cool with it. They just roll with it. They're like, oh, okay, this is how things go. Well, we'll stay here, we'll go out into town, we'll buy you a whole new wardrobe, and we'll come up with an excuse, and ready, set, go. Now, one of the things that happens in this story is he starts hearing about disasters, but he hears about disasters before they happen. He gains some form of clairvoyance, which is what you would call it if it was the modern day, but they choose not to call it that. We'll get to that in a second. Anyway, he saves this acrobat here and has no idea how to explain this change, but thankfully the most important character in 1950s comic books shows up. Convenient explanation background guy. You look enough like Superboy to be his twin sister. Maybe Superboy never revealed your existence for reasons of his own, and I guess that's good enough for everyone. Okay, cool. Problem solved. And the rest of the book, Clark now has Super Sister. I'm not too proud to admit that Superman is a generic man. Generic doesn't mean bad, though. Super Sister is bad. Now, Super Sister would go around and commit all kinds of heroic deeds and save all kinds of people, but every time she did, her super hearing would pick up some snide sexist remark from the crowd somewhere. And eventually, enough of this happens that Clark kind of comes to the conclusion, this is just kind of what we're dealing with, but I'm not going to let this change who I am. I'm going to continue to do good things and to save as many people as I can, regardless of what people think of me. And then it's revealed that the whole thing was a hypnotic trance. The ring was actually just a hypnotic suggestion, and he lived it suggested months within the book this way. And then we get home, and Martha says, "This feels insensitive to me. We have a fine son, Jonathan, but sometimes I wish we had a daughter too. Clark, you're not good enough." And he's like, well, okay, and we set the camera and we move on. The third prototype, they went in a very different direction. This is still by Otto Binder. And they decided to just create a Supergirl from pure romantic magic.
What?
Basically, Superman saves Lois and Jimmy from, normal Tuesday shenanigans. And it's important to note, we're going to see this later, Superman in the 50s and 60s really doesn't like Lois Lane, and really is kind of just annoyed by her. He doesn't care about like her advances towards him. He finds it more annoying than anything else. And it's mostly because he just really likes being a superhero first and being a human second. His healthiest relationship during this time was with a literal mermaid, because she was not human. She was somehow superhuman, and that was more attractive to him, I guess. That's going to become important later in a really surprising way. But he saves them, and Jimmy says, if I had a magic wish, I'd wish for Supergirl to appear and join Superman. Later, Superman saves the archaeologist, and the archaeologist is like, oh, how can I repay you? And Superman says, well, I don't know. Why don't you give a priceless ancient artifact to my buddy Jimmy here, and we'll call it an even deal. And he says, okay. And it turns out the magic artifact is Jimmy a Wish, and because Jimmy is a real bro, he wishes for Superman to have a girlfriend. And it's this Supergirl. This Supergirl just kind of shows up out of nowhere, falls madly in love with Superman, and Superman really likes her too. They go off and they do superheroic deeds. They have a bit of an adjustment period because since they're both doing super deeds, they kind of overestimate how much power to use. Like they blow roofs off of buildings trying to blow fires out because it's just too much and stuff like that. Now, eventually, random thugs, number 1 and 2, they have no connection, they never show up again, have a huge basketball-sized chunk of kryptonite, because everyone did. And they throw it at Superman, and Supergirl's like, hey, don't worry, since I'm magically created, I'm actually immune to kryptonite. And Superman's like, sweet, that's awesome, I'm here for it. The top 10. It turns out she was lying. This happens in the outskirts. And it's implied through the captions that she crawls several miles into the center of Metropolis to get to Jimmy's house. Why would no one help her?
Sexism.
Maybe. It's not truly explained, but this book ends very suddenly as well, where Supergirl's like, oh, just wish that I never existed, because that would be so much better on Superman than if I were to die. I don't see how the end result is different, but okay. But these experiments by Otto Bender were enough to get the green light to create Kara Zor-El. In Action Comics 252, which also introduced Metallo, heck of a book, they introduce Supergirl, and her first story it's just an origin recap, nothing really exciting happens. She's on the Kryptonian city Argo, which had been protected by like a bubble shield when Krypton exploded. And the city was slowly getting poisoned by kryptonite, but she was looking through a magic telescope, saw Superman doing all kinds of cool things, and said, I want to be just like him. And so she got a Superman costume, and she got on a rocket and came to Earth. And that's cool. But you could tell that publishing still wasn't sure about whether or not they wanted to keep her. Because it wasn't until issue 360, almost 100 issues later, that she really gets established. This issue, she gets adopted by the Danvers. She gets co-ownership of the Fortress of Solitude. She gets a public unveiling as this new superhero. Prior to this, she was referred to as Superman's secret weapon. If something was too tough, psych, there's 2 Kryptonians. What are you going to do now? And then she would fly back off to the orphanage and proceed to do everything in her power not to get adopted. It's nuts. She promised that she wouldn't get adopted unless it was a family that could handle her being a superhero. Her first appearance, there's this family that comes in and wants to adopt her. And she looks into the guy's suit jacket through her X-ray vision, finds a business card saying that he's a plumber. And she says, oh, that would be nice. I've been waiting for a family that's exciting and interesting, maybe a rocket scientist or an astronaut or someone high up in the military, someone important. And the guy cries. She makes the man cry as he's walking out of the orphanage thinking that everybody hates him because of his job. And it's like, wow. But that's just how Supergirl happened, and she became really popular. She got like co-billing on Action Comics for a long time. They had the little character portraits up in the top, and she had a character portrait next to Superman's. Like she was really popular. But then 1985 happened. And in 1985, you had all of these versions of Superman that were in somewhat recent memory. And none of them are consistent. The only thing consistent about them is the names, the outfit, and some of the powers. Are the kids alive? Sometimes, sometimes not. Is Krypton a dystopian or a utopia? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Can Superman fly fast enough to go back in time? Sometimes he can, sometimes he can't. And you just kind of ran into this problem where DC wasn't able to create a coherent understanding of Superman because it was all just too different. So what they did was they commissioned John Byrne of X-Men and Fantastic Four fame to leave Marvel, come to DC, write Superman, and create all kinds of new rules that they will forevermore and every single medium follow in order for Superman to exist. And he said, Superman is the last son of Krypton, and that's it. Nobody else comes from Krypton. It's all gone. There is no Krypto, there is no Streaky, there is no Kara Danvers, there is no Supergirl. And for some reason, DC says, sure, we'll go with it. So they killed off Supergirl in Crisis on Infinite Earths so that we could have a clean reboot of Superman. This didn't stop writers from wanting to put her in books, though. But they still couldn't use Krypton. They couldn't use any of the traditional methods. So this is where we get Matrix, who goes by May for short and for convenience. It's not like you meet random people on the street. Hey, what's your name? My name is Matrix. Oh, that's way cool. No, Matrix is the purple goop. Turns out in the pocket dimension, there was a version of Lex Luthor who created goop that thought it was a person to protect them from bad guys, but then the bad guys killed everyone. And the goop had nowhere to go, so Superman took the goop home and took it to Smallville, Kansas. But then the goop wasn't sure what its identity was. You can see here in these blue top panels that it didn't really have a real form, didn't really have a real identity, didn't have any idea what its powers were. For a while, it impersonated Superman. And you have this evil Superman running around that was actually just purple goop, trying to figure out what it was. Superman defeated it, the goop went off into space, came back, and decided it wanted to be Supergirl. It's like, okay, rock on, great way to go. And her powers are very different. She has flight and strength, but most of her powers are actually telekinesis. She can, she lifts things, but she can lift things with her mind from a distance, which was way cool. She had pyrotechnic powers through her mind and that kind of thing. It was really cool, and she was a really neat character, though she wasn't Kara Zor-El. We actually do get Kara Zor-El. They were somehow able to make a workaround, and it only happened here in Superman vs. Aliens. And I wish this was the way that they went, because then forevermore we'd have to say that aliens are canonical to Supergirl's origin. And that would have been great. But Superman meets this character who's basically just Ripley, but her name is Kara. She comes from a planet that's like Krypton. She speaks Kryptonese, she writes in Kryptonese. She is Kara Zor-El. At the end of the book, Superman thinks she dies. The writers made sure she didn't die, so if we needed to pull a Supergirl out of our back pocket for any reason, she was here and she was fighting Xenomorphs. I'm going to skip over 3 for a second, because 3 is really important. I want to talk a little bit about 4. Zor-El was an attempt to try and get Supergirl's powers away from the telekinetic thing. They went with the telekinetic thing because Supergirl couldn't have all of Superman's powers. They thought they found a workaround here with Zor-El. Zor-El was created by Brainiac to be portrayed as the future daughter of Superman and Lois. And she was way cool. But because her existence was causing all kinds of crises and calamities for everyone, she jumped into a time stream and undid her own existence. Very heroic, very cool. She didn't last for very long. And the reason why she didn't last for very long is because of Supergirl number 3, Linda Danvers. Linda Danvers, you'll probably recognize that. That's the costume that Supergirl wore in the animated series. Another one where she wasn't from Krypton. She wasn't strictly Superman's cousin, but that was close enough. Linda Danvers is just a normal person. But then one day, Matrix found her, and they did the Dragon Ball Fusion dance and turned into this girl who could summon Supergirl's superpowers. And she still had the telekinetic stuff. And her biggest, most important story, and for a long time, this was considered the best Supergirl story. I highly recommend it to everyone here. It's Many Happy Returns. In this book, Kara Danvers got lost on her way to the Silver Age and landed in the modern age and was found by Linda. Now, Linda is like, okay, I'll help you out here. And she's informed by the Spectre that she needs to send Kara back to the Silver Age so that she can die in the crisis. And Linda says, no way, Jose. And she goes off into the Silver Age herself. And she takes Supergirl's place, lives a full life, falls in love with Superman, because Superman likes superheroes in the Silver Age. They get married, they have kids, and they're just inching closer and closer and closer to the crisis. And Linda says, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to die in the crisis. Let's save Kara. And Spectre shows up and says, just kidding, it's not going to work. You're going to have to send Kara back. And then she makes a hard choice and sends Kara back. And because of that, she couldn't bring herself to do Supergirl stuff anymore and quits. That's the in-story reason. The real story reason is that DC got the go-ahead to use Kara as Zor-El again. Now, this version of Kara introduces a couple of really important things that we see a lot. Because of the way the story was set up, they had to create a time dilation, which is very popular. If you watch any kind of Supergirl media now, she got lost in like a wormhole, which is why she's still 16 and Superman is like 30 after the explosion of Krypton. The biggest thing they introduced, though, and this is really, really important, we're going to see this play out a lot in the movie, I bet you, is they introduced her own PTSD from seeing Krypton explode. Mm-hmm. She was there when Brainiac was taking the city of Kandor prior to Krypton facing its final and ultimate doom. She remembers her dad sending her off before the planet exploded. She remembers seeing the planet. She remembers all of her friends, all of her family. And now all of that has been stripped away. And the one mission she had, go to Earth and protect your baby cousin, is now no longer relevant. Because he's an adult. He can take care of himself. If anything, he's taking care of her now. These are really important elements that it's kind of surprising. This only happened in 2003 because it feels so ingrained into who Supergirl is from the very beginning. We do get one last hurrah from all the Supergirl stuff. In Superman Batman number 24, which Superman Batman is kind of if you're interested in Supergirl, that's kind of like a secret Supergirl book. She has a lot of consequence in that, and it was in Superman Batman that she was reintroduced and her origin retold. But there's a moment where Superman is stuck in the Source Wall, which in the DC universe is the barrier between the world of fiction and the world of reality. And nothing can escape the Source Wall. Except for the protagonist of our story. And sometimes the antagonist. So she gets together all of our past Supergirls to go in and yank Superman out from the clutches of the Source Wall. We get the Silver Age Kara Danvers here, Linda comes back, Zor-El comes back, and then we get Power Girl. Power Girl, there's like a little aside here for Power Girl. Her thing is that she is Supergirl from Earth 2. At the time, Earth 2 was an Earth where time progressed in real time. So when she was introduced, Superman and Lois had already been married for like 20 years, so they just adopt her. And I like to think that they thought this was an interesting character, which is why she got to survive through the crisis when Supergirl didn't get to. But I sometimes wonder, because I think there might have been a couple of other reasons why she might have survived. But so that's kind of what happened with all of the Supergirl. But here's the thing about fiction. Fiction is a vacation. We live here in the real world, then we open up a comic book, we read it, we fall in love with the characters, we fall in love with the experiences. We take some pictures, we get some souvenirs, and we come back, and those souvenirs help us make our normal day-to-day actual world a little bit cleaner, a little bit more fun. So far, we've given a lot of fun facts about Supergirl and this wacky, crazy history that this character has been on. But something really stood out to me as I was going through this journey and learning about all of these different characters. I saw just how when you take the character and you give them enough space to kind of make their own choices, kind of grow, become their own character, they become really interesting and the world becomes a lot deeper, a lot more nuanced than before. She started off as a copy of Superman, like a literal copy of Superman. And then she showed up and was basically given the job to make Superboy stories where you didn't have to worry about continuity. We didn't have to say, oh, Superman's going to come, so none of this has to count. We actually have, we can make things happen. And then she started gaining more of her own agency. And when we take that away from just a fictional world, I want us to think about that. When we're interacting with people, when we're interacting with our friends, how can we help them achieve their full potential? What does giving space to an individual who maybe hasn't had a whole lot of space to say something, what can happen when we do present that environment for it? When we let them just grow and develop? And I think that is the real interesting mark of Supergirl. It is too often she is seen as just kind of like the spin-off to Superman. But because Otto Binder took a chance, and because writers kept coming in and adding bits and pieces, even against all kinds of publishing regulations that said it shouldn't work, they were able to create a new modern interpretation of Supergirl that just really gels and really jives with me. Yeah. So, we have some time if anyone has any questions or thoughts about what we have, and I'm happy to go ahead and try and answer them.